Welcome to episode 63 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian currently in my 13th year, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who contact the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast does something for you. I'd like to extend a special welcome this week to listeners Liliana in Mumbai, Lisa in Michigan, Christina in Maryland, Deb and Mari in California, Wendy in Massachusetts, Karen in Connecticut, Heather in North Carolina, Cindy in New York, and to Penny in New Zealand. I hope you are staying cool during the sweltering summer you are having, and I'm sorry your library doesn't have air conditioning. Julie in Virginia messaged the podcast today, and she wrote, I have listened to Extreme Weeding number 34 and 45 minutes feels like forever episode number 32. I am in year 2 of being a school librarian, and I'm learning so much. I related well to the weeding episode. I acquired a library with books going from end to end of each and every shelf. Students couldn't pull out books without other books falling on the floor. I weeded over 5,000 books last year since the library had never had an extreme weeding done. So many staff members have had an issue with this. I love the comparison to garage sale eyes. I never heard of Go Noodle, just put the app on my phone, and I'm thinking of tons of lessons where I could connect this in the library. I will be sharing your findings, lessons, and wisdom with others. I also wanted to say hi to Melissa. She's in Virginia as well. And Melissa wrote, I wanted to reach out because I really enjoy listening to your podcast on a weekly basis. When I graduated, one of the questions I had to answer was, what did I follow to continue my library education? And I wished I listened to you back then. I love your grant episode, and I keep the links handy. I just applied to a Walmart grant and will be applying to the Dollar Tree grant shortly as they opened up. I love how you also share how to contact people. I start following every person who gives out their Twitter handle on your show. You also inspired me to reach out to Jerry Kraft of The New Kid to see if he would come and do an author visit when he's in my area for a Battle of the Books competition. I haven't heard back from him, but I wouldn't have thought to do it without your show. And listeners, I really want to thank everybody who takes the time to reach out to the podcast each week. My goal has been to share out great ideas and resources and to inspire school librarians to connect with others and to try out new programs and lessons that would benefit their classes. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback, questions, and episode suggestions either on Facebook, Twitter, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I will be sure to put a podcast sticker in the mail. And now for today's episode, Supporting English Language Learners, and my interview with Michelle Craig. Unlike grade level and subject matter teachers who work with a portion of the student body each year, school librarians, because we service entire schools, are going to work with every student attending. And for that reason alone, we should be equipped to support all our students, including English language learners. How this episode came to happen is a good story, and I encourage all listeners, if you ever identify a glaring void in our episode lineup where one should be, please reach out. When today's guest wrote me, it was as if someone gift-wrapped an episode and dropped it in my lap to share with you. And now, my interview with Michelle Craig. So, listeners, we are in for a treat today. I am having a conversation with Michelle Craig, and you'll see right away why she's the perfect person to be talking to about this topic. But before we get to meet her, I want to explain how this episode happened. Today's episode is it started with an email that Michelle emailed to the podcast on December 10th. And she wrote, quote, "I couldn't find any podcast episodes about English as a new language and how libraries can best prepare to meet the needs of English language learners. I'm wondering if you've ever did one on this topic. If not, is it something you might consider? Thank you." And that's how this conversation started. So listeners, I want to introduce you to Michelle Craig.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Craig. I'm an elementary librarian in a small town on Long Island, and I'm just very excited to be here.
Well, I'm really glad that you reached out to the podcast because I'm embarrassed. Absolutely. You found a gap in this, podcast, and that is we've never addressed the needs of English language learners. So I before we get any further, it was sort of coincidental. I found a quote on ALA's website, and I'll put this in our show notes, listeners. And it goes like this. Quote, "With such high concentrations of ELL in our schools and free choice reading indicated as successful learning initiative, school library media specialists are in a unique position to make significant contributions to this unique student population," end quote, said the AASL president, Cassandra Barnett. Quote, "Clearly, resources in both reading materials as well as certified and trained school library media specialists can greatly impact the success of ELL," end quote. And that's from 2010 when a survey was distributed. So given just how important school librarians can be in the life of an English language learner, Michelle, would you clarify for us before we get started this English language learners in this alphabet soup that we hear so often?
Yes. So there are many acronyms, and often teachers and librarians and even parents can get kind of confused as to what we mean by ESL versus ELL and ENL. And just to clarify, so ESL is sort of an old acronym, English as a second language. And the reason they changed it to ENL, which is English as a new language, is because they found that some of these students were learning English as their third or fourth or fifth language. So rather than saying English as a second language, they now call it ENL, which is English as a new language, because it could be their third or fourth language. And then ELL refers to the actual learners, so English language learners. So when I refer to my L's, some people call them, it's my English language learners versus ENL, which is the program itself, English as a new language.
Wow. All right. Well, I was embarrassed. I actually went to my EEL teacher, or we in Michigan, I've heard ELL, it's ENL, English as a new language. And she's wonderful because she actually speaks 3 languages. So when I said English as a new language, she's like, that makes complete sense, because all too often we're talking to students with multiple languages and English is just one of them. So, so tell us, are you an ENL teacher? A certified ENL teacher. And how did this all happen?
Okay, so I started teaching in a town at the very eastern tip on Long Island, and we had 50% Spanish speakers. And I was a classroom teacher getting my master's in library. And then once I became a high school librarian in that district, I found that after school and my after school hours in the library, although 50% of our school were Spanish speakers, I found that like 90% of the students who were staying after school were speaking Spanish. And I wanted to, best be able to help them because they were doing their homework and doing schoolwork. And I decided then to go get my certification in ENL, and mostly because I wanted to help these kids after school. And out of the whole school population, 50% were Spanish speaking. So I don't work in that district anymore, but now I'm in a small school in an elementary library where we have about less than 10% Spanish speaking. But that's kind of how and where I started was out on the eastern end, and why I decided to get my certification, just because we had such a large population of Spanish speakers.
Well, and just as we've just met and I'm just sort of getting my bearings, but when I think about it, you had a couple options here. You could just learn Spanish.
Yes. And it's funny because the languages that I took, the classes that I took to get my TESOL certification were actually Spanish, French, and sign language. So I'm not even fluent in Spanish. I do understand some Spanish, and I can communicate very little, but I found that really I got my certification because, we did have students who spoke Turkish and Chinese and Spanish, but mostly, most of my students are Spanish speakers.
Well, and it seems to me like the approach you took by getting your certification, rather than trying to learn the language of the students who you happen to be teaching that at that time, is the solution that would address a larger community of learners. Because while, today you're working with students who speak Spanish, it might be that you're working with students. For me, I've got some students who speak Portuguese and students who speak French. So, and the teacher I've been working with, our ELL teacher, said, you need to make sure that it's not you learning how to speak their language. You're helping them be as comfortable in your environment as you can. So how do you make our French, in this case, French students, understand how to find things in the library and enhance their ability to understand the English language?
I think you make a really good point. So when I'm a full-time librarian, but I teach one period a day ENL. And my one period a day ENL looks very different than the rest of my day as a librarian. So during that one period of ENL, I'm really putting an emphasis on making sure that the students are comfortable in learning English. And I have other students who are quick to translate for them, and I really discourage them at that time to translate for them because I want to create a safe environment for them to learn and practice English. That's during my ENL period. A little bit different during my school day as a librarian. I allow the translations between the students. I want to encourage them to speak their native language. I also want to make sure that I'm providing materials and books and audio materials in their native language, and also providing literature on their country where they came from. So my day looks a little bit different. When I'm teaching ENL, I'm encouraging English and not as much translating, whereas during the day as a librarian, I have English and Spanish words and vocabulary posted around the room. I have the Spanish section of books predominantly located right in the middle of the library, and I'm encouraging the translations and using the translation apps and things like that. So I find that it's a little bit different depending on if I'm teaching during my ENL period or teaching as a librarian.
Cool. So tell me, how does your day work? Because then that means there's some time when your library is not being covered because you're in the classroom, or do they just come and take classes in the library?
So I am part of the specials rotation. I teach 6 periods a day out of 8 periods. So I get 1 lunch and 1 prep. And unfortunately, I don't teach kindergarten because I have 1 period of ENL a day. So kindergarten goes to art instead of library. But at the end of the year, I do try to get them in with our older kids, and we do a little Tech Buddies program. But for the most part, I'm able to teach every 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade class and 1 period of ENL each day, and it kind of fits my schedule perfectly. So 1 period ENL, and the rest of the day I'm teaching grades 1 through 5 in library. That's really,
it's impressive. I teach a fixed schedule as well, but I don't have to shift gears like that as much as you do. So you're in a fixed schedule. It sounds like you are crazy busy. Can I just ask, do the kindergartners in the other schools in your district get library, or is that across the board? Kindergarten does not get library as a rotation.
So we are a very small school. We're the only elementary library. So there's nothing to really compare. When I first started in this district, which was 6 years ago, I did teach kindergarten through 5th grade, but our Spanish speaking population has been growing over the years. And that's when our ENL teacher couldn't fit all of the state mandates into her schedule. They knew I was certified, and that's when they took away my kindergartners and gave me an ENL section.
So I'm curious, with your ENL section that you teach, it's multi-age, is it? So it's multi-age.
No, well, it's multi-level. So there's 5 levels when it comes to ENL. So there's entering, emerging, transitioning, expanding, and commanding. So it's interesting because although they're all in 2nd grade, they're not necessarily at the same level. And so although it's not multi-age, it is multi-level when it comes to like the ENL aspect to it.
I like that there is a way to differentiate there. It sounds like, is this an assessment that you do sort of informally, or you can?
No, so not informally. There is a test called the NYSA exam, and it's the New York State. I'm in New York, so New York State exam, and it kind of puts them into one of these categories. So most of my students are transitioning, but we did just have a new student come in a couple weeks ago, and he came right from Columbia, so he never took the NYSA exam. So we administered something called the NYSA exam, which is just for students who are new to our country. And then that exam will then place them into most likely entering if they're just first coming to this country for the first time. So although I only have 2nd graders, they're all sort of at different levels.
Well, and as their ENL teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
As their ENL teacher, do you then report back to their classroom teacher as to how much or how little the kids can understand? Does that conversation take place?
Yes. So I developed a really close relationship with the classroom teacher that I work with. This is the 2nd classroom teacher that I've worked with. And we talk every day, and we meet formally every single Friday. We have a lot of parent conferences, so I'm included in all the parent conferences as well as team teacher sort of data meetings. So I'm invited to all of the meetings regarding, involving my students, and we do make sure that we meet consistently. So I feel like for me, I'm only collaborating with one teacher with ENL. I would assume it's much more challenging for the full-time ENL teacher that she has so many different teachers to collaborate with, but I've really become very close with the ENL teacher that I work with. So it's really just worked out that we communicate very often.
Think of something, these students who are being integrated into our larger student population, of the classes that they get to go to, when I think of like art and gym and library and music, it seems to me like each one would pose a small challenge, but would also maybe be one of the most liberating classes of the day for these kids, because language skills, while it's great to have them, you can go into an art class and not necessarily require a strong command of the English language.
Right.
Same thing with gym class. You go into your gym class, and if it's soccer that day, you may have your best kid may be kid who doesn't speak a single word of English. So I don't know. And you go into art, music, and gym, and then you come to library, and it's a library full of books that might not be recognizable. I guess I do want to sort of. I want to get to what your collection looks like. I really do. But I do want to ask you, are your students in your ENL program, are they given like a technology to help them with their transition, like an app or like an iPad with a translation app?
That's a good question. We recently just got 6 carts of Chromebooks, so we're a Google school. However, after reaching out to other ENL teachers, I found that it might be a great resource to have iPads. So I went on to Donors Choose, and I put in for 5 iPads, and it was like $2,000 or whatever the maximum amount that you're allowed to apply for. And within a couple months, somebody fully funded our project, and we got 5 iPads, and I used them for my ENL kids. And there are translation apps that we downloaded, and different reading apps, and education.com we use, Raz Kids, and then we use Google Translate, both on the Chromebooks and on the iPads. And there's a few different apps that we use for translating. But I find that even with my newcomers who know zero English, I don't use them as much as you would think. So while it's available for them, we don't use them often. The kids do have fun using Google Translate, and there's one other app. I'm drawing a blank on it.
Oh, it's okay. You can always let me know, and I'll include it in the show notes. I do have to ask, because librarians are not in the habit of testing our students. I do know that some librarians have to collect data, but you're sort of in this unenviable position as an ENL teacher. Is it ENL teacher or ELL teacher?
ENL teacher.
You're an ENL teacher. So you're an ENL teacher. You have to assess your students on a somewhat frequent basis to see how they're doing speaking English. Mm-hmm. I imagine when you sit down and sort of assess them, you have to do so in a way that doesn't seem intimidating, and to be comforting to them, and just, sort of like, we're just going to try this. I know our teacher has to assess our English language learners, and it's like, it seems so like, okay, we're going to now give you a test.
Yes, I know. And you know what? We really try not to teach to the NYSA exam, which is coming up in April. We try not to do test prep, because I feel like then it's not, organic, to see what they are actually learning in our program. So there are assessments that we use, and we don't bring them to a separate room or, make it scary. I teach all my ENL classes in the library, so I keep them in that environment where they're comfortable. And basically with ENL, we assess, there's 4 different categories that we assess. We look at listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So with my pullouts, I really work a lot. You would think reading as a librarian, but they do actually also go to reading every day. So I tend to focus more on their writing, speaking, and listening. Although those are the 4 topics that we kind of focus on: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And we do informal assessments throughout the year. We have checklists and writing samples and things that we use just to kind of progress monitor.
Cool. Can I ask, how many students do you currently have in that class?
Right now, I only have 8 in 2nd grade. So I've had 9, I've had 7. So I pull 8, and they're a very energetic group of students. And there is a lot to look at and a lot to be distracted in the library. That is one thing that I must say. A lot of teachers coming in and out, students coming in and out during that period. So I don't post a sign on the door that says, "Do not disrupt, ENL in progress." So I kind of let things happen while I'm working with this group, which can be definitely distracting for them.
Right.
But again, I don't have a separate space that I bring them. So they do love the library. I have some flexible seating that they enjoy using. And I really think that they find it, as a safe environment.
Sure. Well, that leads me to my next question. Would you tell us, you said you're on a fixed schedule, so there are library lessons that you teach your students. How do you support your English language learners as when you are giving instruction in the library, as part of your library instruction? How would you suggest, what have you found to be best practice when you are giving library instruction and you're aware there are students in your room who are English language learners?
Right. That's a good question, because I think the obvious is having a collection with, books in all different languages and things like that. But when I'm doing a read aloud and conducting a lesson, I really think that there's much more to it. So I love to kind of gather background knowledge if we're learning about a nonfiction subject. I like to incorporate culturally meaningful stories. So around the holidays, we might look at holidays around the world. Watching my words, I think, is really important. So I might clarify instructions. I might talk a little slower. I build background knowledge. One thing that I always do is I have a Chromebook in the reading corner with me. So if there is a teachable moment, we can grab the Chromebook. We can look something up. We can look at pictures. So visuals are very important. So not just pictures, but also graphic organizers, tangible objects. With my little guys, if we're doing nursery rhymes and we're doing Baba Black Sheep, I might have a real wool sweater that they can all feel. So visuals, meaning tangible objects, graphic organizers, pictures, vocabulary. I know a lot of classrooms have word walls, so I like to have a word wall as well. I like to make my stories really interactive. So choral responses, if we're doing a book with animals and everyone says moo, or I'll huff and I'll puff. So I like to get the kids involved, music, songs, and all that fun stuff. So
I like that you did include in the show notes a link to a great article about how libraries can support our English language learners. And so I want to make sure listeners to check the show notes, because there's a great article that you sent us that will spell out some of these strategies. I know when I do things, and my English language learners right now are in the upper elementary grades. And so when we're doing things like research, I put the icons. If the kids are doing a gathering of information, I'll put pictures of the icons in the instructions so that they have a visual of where we're going. And then also a lot of the things, I use the smartboard a great deal so that they can, if I'm giving instructions, they can also see what I'm pointing at using the smartboard.
Definitely.
So, and I think some of this is best practice for some of our students.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway.
Because essentially they're all English language learners, whether English is their first language or second or third, they're all learning English. So best practice. Exactly. I think a lot of this librarians are already doing, so it's nothing new. But I also wanted to just mention wait time. This was kind of a, hi, Molly. My baby just woke up.
Go, Mommy, go.
Here she is.
Oh, look. Hi, sweetie. Hi, everybody. We have our first guest who is, there she is. Hello, sweet pea. Hi. Oh, she's very excited to see her mommy on the screen. Well, I'll tell you what, we've had meowing on our podcast as well. So we should have babies. And yes, my sons who choose to play video games while I'm recording, they do not get to be part of the podcast, and I have to edit them out sometimes. So, but I appreciate you doing this during nap time. I feel awfully guilty.
No problem. She's up. My husband's good. He's a teacher. He's home.
Awesome.
But what I was just saying is wait time. I feel like that's very important. So if I call on a student who has their hands up, I'm quick to, say, all right, I'll come back to you. When you remember what you were going to say, we'll come back to you, and I pick on the next student. So usually I give it 3, 4, 5 seconds, but it's important with English language learners just to remember up to 10 seconds, which really could feel like a long time. You want to make sure you give them at least 10 seconds just to kind of think, process, and then share. So it might, in the beginning, I really felt like, okay, do they have something to say? Should I call in another student? Do they feel awkward? But I feel like wait time is very important, and just giving them that time to share what they want to say. I think that raising their hand, you don't want to discourage them from raising their hand if you're too quick to go to another student. Or even just having a conversation one-on-one, just giving them that time to kind of process and say what they need to say is very important.
Something that I was doing with my students was I was including them in the responsibilities of the library. So we would have jobs like passing out the pencils, collecting the papers, and I would, those kinds of jobs, really from the beginning, I called on my students based on their table numbers. Hey, chair number 4, go get the pencils. Chair number 2, go get the crayons, and so forth. And I had no problem including my English language learners in that. And, sometimes their neighbor would tap on them and say, oh, you have to go get the pencils. And so it includes everybody, and it doesn't put that expectation of conversation on them, but they are part of the classroom dynamic. I know with my students, I tried to include a lot of visuals also in the signage that's in my library. And I do that for my pre-readers anyway, because we have young 5s. So some of our students are not yet 5 or turning 5. And some of them are great little readers, and some of them have not gotten there. So my signs include a lot of pictures to them. So it made taking my students around who were getting acclimated, because they could see the pictures in especially the nonfiction section, but also in my picture book section. So
Yes, that's definitely something that over the past couple of years that I've increased my signage, and not just having the numbers of the letters, but also having pictures in the nonfiction section, like you were saying. There was a very powerful activity that was done at a conference that I went to. So I always think of this activity, and basically the instructor was giving us directions in, I want to say it was like Russian. It was definitely a language that, it wasn't English, it wasn't Spanish. It was definitely a language that most of us in the conference didn't know. And she was giving us directions, and she basically was using gestures and hand motions and pointing and modeling for us what we should be doing. And by the end of the activity, we all knew exactly what to do without knowing a single word of what she was saying. So she had us fold an index card in half, and she modeled it. She had us write our names on the index card. She had us place it in a certain spot. And she was walking us through step by step, one step at a time, using hand motions and gestures and pointing and modeling. And it was just amazing what we were able to do, following directions in Russian. You know, none of us knew the language, but we were all able to complete whatever activity it was that she wanted us to do. Just based on modeling and hand gestures. And I just find that was so powerful to me. I'll never forget that. And I find that with my newcomers, which we only really have 2 or 3 out of our 48 who are newcomers right now in that first entering stage. But I always make sure that I'm using my hand gestures and modeling and repeating the directions and pointing and using, those visuals for them, because even if they don't understand the language, they're still watching at what you're, watching what you're doing.
Well, and what a great exercise in building empathy. I mean, I think as educators, we all consider ourselves to be incredibly empathetic people, but to be in a situation where we are at a complete disadvantage, not understanding Russian, and being in that exact position of not knowing what the person is saying is, I'm sure, very disorienting. And it's important as an educator to appreciate just how the challenge that our children who are learning English are overcoming by in this process. And I did something to my students, because I took French as a high schooler, and of course promptly forgot it, but I still remember a little bit. And so when my students walked in with my French student, I started the class in French, and he looked at me and smiled and smiled, and the other students looked around, and they're like, "Mrs. Herman, we don't understand you." And it was really, I said, well, maybe now you know how your classmate feels.
Yeah. No, so that's something that I also, with my classroom management in the library, I try to incorporate other languages, even if I'm not familiar with how to count in Turkish or how to say certain things in other languages. I do my best to learn. So when we're entering the reading corner, for example, I put 10 on the top row. We have like a little stadium seating, 8 on the bottom row. So I try to, count in Spanish, 1, 2, 3, 4, as they enter the top, and they sometimes start counting along. Or I might count in sign language, or I might ask Mehmet to help me count in Turkish. So I definitely try to incorporate other languages, and the kids really do get so excited. And just another little classroom management thing that I do is we had 2 students in my experience who used sign language to communicate. And so when I need to get their attention, I would just start finger spelling. If you can hear me, show me the letter A. If you can hear me, show me the letter M. If you can hear me, show me the letter Y. And I'll start finger spelling somebody's name. And that will get everyone's attention. Everyone's quiet and engaged, and they're finger spelling, and they're learning the letters, of the alphabet in sign language. And I found that those students who communicate with sign language were just so excited, and the kids who are learning finger spelling are now excited to finger spell and use sign language with them. So I try to incorporate other languages, just little behavioral management techniques throughout my lessons, just to have those other students kind of feel included.
Well, I do work with somebody who uses sign language and as a classroom management tool, because the students are so captivated, and it's like learning a secret code for them.
Right, exactly.
And so it's a very effective tool, because just very simple instructions, and she's not shown them to me. I just know that this happens in her library because we've talked about it. And she says it's a really effective way to get the kids' attention right away because they all want to know exactly what you're doing and learn those signals as well. So I think that's fantastic. What could you tell me a little bit about what Reader's Advisory looks like with your English language learners? When I meet students who have just transferred from another school district, and these are regular, I don't want to say regular, but these are our students who come in and I've never worked with them before. I ask standard questions like, hi, can you tell me what kind of books you like to read? Can you tell me what books you liked in your library that you just came from? And I get great ideas about how I can help them. How do you do that with your English language learners?
That's a good question. So I find we don't have a leveled library where we have, level A, B, and C, lower level books. So it's tough when the teachers or the parents are asking me to find books for their children at a certain reading level. So that's difficult. But I feel like although it takes some preparation, it's worth it in the end. So I don't conduct a reading interest inventory with all of my students. I've done that in the past, and then I have 700 interest inventories, and I don't know what to do with them. But with, I can't possibly go through all of them. But with new students or students who are not interested in reading or not checking out books, or my ELL students who come in, my English language learners, I do have several different interest inventories that I give to them, and I try to get to know them as readers and what they might be interested in. So there's my go-to sections that are super popular by all of the students, and I do try to find picture-heavy text, I guess you could say, for them, and I don't want to overwhelm them with a higher reading level, but it's difficult. I feel like it takes preparation. You have to really get to know the students, and you really need to kind of pull different options for them to look through and just see what works. So I think every student is different.
Well, I know I'm sort of preaching to the choir, but for me, with my the two I'm working with in particular, because they're in 3rd and 4th grade, they wanted to go to the same bookshelves their friends were, and they were making friends, and that was great. And all their friends were going to the graphic novel section. So the kids gravitated over to and I have a pull-out graphic novel section, and naturally my English language learners went also to the graphic novel section. And I also made a point of showing them some of our nonfiction section, like our animals, because those are all well identified with pictures. And I think that as they get more comfortable, they'll branch out. But right now, they're both on graphic novel kicks. They're very visual, fewer words on the page, so it's less intimidating. And the content is still relevant to their age group, so they don't feel they're like they're reading books that are too young for them. And yet and it's interesting because when I was talking to their English language ENL teacher, I said, I'm happy to give them an extension if they need more time to read these books. And she said, actually, they don't usually need more time because they're going through these books faster than you would expect. And it's very empowering for them. They feel very capable when they can go through these books. You'll be surprised. You don't usually have to extend the time that they need them.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to learn the French word for renew, because the students have to tell me if they want to renew them. And each time the kids came in, they wanted new books. And so I actually printed out, so in this case, it was the Raina Tegelmeyer's Babysitters. And so what I did for one of my students is I just gave her a printout of each book in the order they were in the series, with a picture and a short description. This is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. And I made those color copies and gave them to her and her teacher. And on it, just included a little something in French from Google Translate that just said, I'm happy to get any of these books for you. Let me know what you would like. And she was really excited because she had this paper with all the books that she wanted to read in order. which was, it helped me feel like I was helping her,
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's awesome. And I think graphic novels are very popular, I think, around all libraries right now, definitely mine. And whether I have a strong reader or a struggling reader or an English language learner, I found that they all gravitate towards the graphic novels, which, like you said, they feel included. And, it's not like they're going to a special section or that they feel like they're reading baby books, So I think that's definitely important. And when I was up in the high school, because I did 4 years as a high school librarian in my old district, we definitely had a large collection of Orca books and high-low books. So it was high interest, low reading level. So it didn't look, like they were reading babyish books. They looked just like chapter books, but they were high interest and low reading level, which helped them.
You started to talk a little bit about your collection, and I'd like you to expand on that a little bit. What have you done with intention to support your English language learners?
So the biggest thing that I did this year was I moved the location of my collection. These Spanish books were way in the back near our local history books, behind the nonfiction books, near our reference books. And I was looking at it one day and it just looked like it was so sad the way, the sign was kind of falling off and they weren't really reshelved the right way. And, it just dawned on me that this is not the best location, where these books are located. And so I moved them literally right to the center of the library, right in front of the circulation desk, right in between our nonfiction and our picture books where we get the highest traffic. And I find that, not only are they 100% being circulated more, but we just introduced FLES, which is foreign language in the elementary school. So we just started teaching Spanish last year to our kids. So they now have Spanish as a special. So even our English speaking kids are so excited. They had no idea that we had books in Spanish in our library. And now even they're circulating the books because they want to learn Spanish. So I just find that just by moving the location of our foreign language books to the center of the library, I don't have the statistics with me, but the circulation, the difference has just been enormous. And I find that, just small change, just moving the location has made a huge, huge difference for not just our English language learners, but the students who also want to learn Spanish.
Do you have both fiction and nonfiction in Spanish?
Yeah, so I have.
Are they all together?
So I have one bookshelf with all of our Spanish books, but each shelf in that bookcase, we have our nonfiction books grouped together. Then we have our everybody books, our picture books all grouped together. We have a biography section, and I think that's it. Maybe just those 3 sections, all on the same shelf. So they're all in the same area, but we do catalog them. SPA first, and then we either have FIC, E, we have our nonfiction, and we have biography. So we have 4 sections. Do
you have a designated spine label that you use for those, or is it just marked in your catalog that they are in the Spanish section?
So they're marked in our catalog, and the call number starts with SPA, and we have a special sticker that we put on. It's like a red and yellow sticker that we ordered from
Follett. Yeah. Can I ask where?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, from Follett. Where is your go-to for books written in Spanish?
So that's an interesting question. So we just, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the International Baccalaureate program, the IB program. So we are the first elementary school on Long Island to be candidates for the PYP. So PYP is the primary years program, and then there's the MYP, which is middle years program, and then DP, that level program, and it's all part of the IB program. So as a PYP school, and the first PYP school on Long Island, I had to start reaching out to librarians from all over the country to kind of figure out, what are you doing to support the PYP framework? And, there are certain requirements as far as having a collection with books of other languages. So Follett is the official IB book vendor, I guess you could call it. So Follett is my go-to, mostly because we are now a new candidacy school for PYP. So I reach out to them. They have a team of experts where I will tell them exactly what I need. They get back to me with the list. I kind of look through the list and then decide which book to order. But definitely, they have been super helpful with building our collection, not just with Spanish books, but also Chinese and Turkish and several different languages. So Follett has been just super helpful with collection development for me.
I love that. Let me ask you before I let you go. What advice would you give to school librarians who are, faced with the news? Hey, guess what? We have some students coming to school and they don't speak any English. What advice would you give to somebody who's doing their best to make their library as supportive a place for a new student who doesn't speak English?
That's a good question. So I think just to make the library a comfortable place for them. So whether that means building your collection to support their language, or if not their language, then books on their culture, having lots of visuals, using the technology. So whether you're taking virtual field trips or looking up pictures or videos to support whatever topic it is that you're talking about, running with those teachable moments. So if you get sidetracked, just kind of go with it, and just to use lots of gestures and hand motions for those newcomers, and also just to make those accommodations and modifications as best you can. So it's very difficult, and I think that it really does take a lot of preparation when you are in that situation, when you have newcomers and new students who don't speak English. But just to do your best and just to make it a fun and comfortable and enjoyable experience for the kids.
Wow. Michelle Craig, you have been very generous with this afternoon and sharing all of your experience working with English language learners. I'm so grateful that you, number one, reached out to the podcast and said, where is this episode on this? Because it's not here, and it is now thanks to you. So I really want to say thanks so much. And, I really appreciate this because you've given us a way to move forward with some confidence that we can support our English language learners.
Yes, and I thank you so much for reaching out. I was so excited to hear from you, and I'm glad to help in any way. But I just still think that I have so much to learn myself as a librarian and an E&L teacher. So thank you so much for reaching out. And if you have any questions, just don't hesitate.
Oh, I will. Now you're part of the PLN. Absolutely. It's getting bigger and bigger with every episode. Thank you so much, Michelle.
You're welcome.
I'm so grateful to Michelle for sharing her strategies with us today. All of our students benefit when our lessons and our library space are configured for our English language learners. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. The topic of our next episode will be Teaching from Stage to Screen, and my interview with Dr. Heather Moorfield-Lang. I hope you will tune in.